All right, welcome to the Amateur Radio, or Utah Amateur Radio Club meeting for December. We've got a fun meeting tonight. Yeah, it's the end of the year, and we've got a lot of things that we need to do for club business tonight. First off, do we have any new hams? No new hams here? How about upgrades? Any upgrades? Anybody here for the first time? All right. We got a couple. Give us your name, your call sign, and your your license class.
I'm a tech. I'm Sean. I'm K9SLE.
Hi, I'm Paul. I'm KJ7COV with a tech.
All right. Well, welcome to the club, and hope you enjoy the meeting tonight. It ought to be kind of fun. Oh. You looked at me like you wanted to say something. Okay. Oh yeah, I'm going the wrong direction. We'll go back here to our book sales, and here we go.
And actually, I'm going to go down front so that the video doesn't try to show something that you can't read. So we do have books here. Books can be ordered if you drop me an email, but we do have some that are discounted. I don't know if Clint, you able to see what I've got here? I'll hold this one up. So high-speed multimedia is $19. List on that is $28. We have high amateur radio transceiver performance testing for $10, regularly $23. ARL's Best of the Doctors in Volume 1, $10, normally $23. And the last one, Henson Kinks for the Radio Amateur 18th edition, $10, regularly $23. And if you want to do a special order this month for pickup in January, I think it's too late to try to do any kind of 25th of December deliveries, but let me know. But if you do a special order, we will see about applying a 10% discount from the ARL price. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thanks. And there's a bunch of books out on the table in the back. Get your wallet out and buy everything up. Okay, we have classes. Morris is going to let us know what those classes are.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. First, I want to welcome everybody. It had been my intention to be there in person, but 2 days ago we had a party here at my house, and the next day one of the attendees found out that they tested positive for COVID-19, and I don't believe I have it, but just in case, I decided it was better not to try and share it. Tonight we have an annual event, which is a voting for club officers. The only position that is really contested is the position for microvolt editor. We have Noji Ratzliff, I'm sorry, Noji, if I butcher your name, KN0JI, and Jed Marti, KI7NNP. Both of these people have submitted articles that are available on our website. I encourage you to go there, read the articles between now and the time we vote, which will be, 5 minutes from now, and decide on which of those two you think will perform best for our editor. Also, Elisabeth Barry KG0 or KG7MEB is going to talk about a topic that she and I have discussed several times, and that's women in ham radio. And I think at least part of what she's going to say is, why do we need to identify that they're a woman? And then the regular presentation will be by Marvin Match, KA7TPH. And I think he's going to talk about a propagation model for the Salt Lake Valley, which sounds fascinating to me. We'll be teaching classes starting in January. On Monday, January 16th, will be the technician class. On Tuesday, the 17th, will be the extra class. And on Wednesdays, starting the 18th of January, will be the general class. The technician and general classes will be online, and the extra class will be in person, probably here at my QTH. The technician and general classes run for 9 weeks, and the extra class runs for 16 weeks. We will have the extra class depending on whether we have any students or not. Right now, as far as I know, we do not have any students, but send me an email if you're interested in taking that extra class, and we will get you signed up and we will have the class. We have often said that we refuse to teach any class with less than one student in it. Back to you, Bruce.
All right. Just put that information. Yeah. I just put that information on the board as to when those classes are and to contact Morris at 87sr@arl.net. So that is where we've got news. The only thing I could think of was the Santa Net that is going all December through the 24th on 80 meter. You can reach out and talk to Santa. I would suggest getting your kids, grandkids, neighbors, and show them how fun HF can be to reach out and talk to somebody who's in another either time zone or latitude. So that ought to be kind of fun. It's 7 p.m. Central Time every night, and you can reach out and CQ the Chris Kringle. All right. Elisabeth Barry, is that right? Yeah. Has a Elmer's Corner minute for us. If she wants to come up and share with us her thoughts.
Okay. About this close? Can you hear me?
That'll work. I can write it.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me to speak, and thank you for your flexibility because, can you go to the next slide? I was able to activate Parks on the Air in Iceland while you guys were here at the meeting, and that was amazing. This is Jupiter on the left-hand side with an aurora. We had a full moon and Jupiter, and I'm amazed that we even captured that. And it was just an incredible country. But thank you for the flexibility, and that's exactly where I want you to be. Thank you. Yes. Okay. So when Mike and Morris talked to me about women in amateur radio, I was very curious what that meant. I wasn't sure what it meant to be a woman in amateur radio. I mean, I get paid the same amount as you guys do in our hobby, right? So it made me deeply curious, and I went on a journey to figure out why it was different for some women, but maybe I hadn't experienced that. I think the biggest lesson I learned is that it's not really about being a woman in amateur radio. I think that we're lacking a sense of community for encouraging everyone to explore our hobby. And I'd like us to consider being, actually anytime I use the word woman or female pronoun, exchange that in your mind for any individual who identifies as the diversity that we lack in this hobby, because I think it's actually a lack of diversity, and some individuals may not be feeling as included and welcome in the hobby. So I did some exploration, and one of the paths took me down a club meeting that was virtual. So I got my my extra license last summer, and I was totally impressed with the Aurora Amateur Radio Group VE team and the totally virtual platform. That's the only way to do it in COVID, right? But I was really impressed. It was very efficient, and so naturally I joined their club meeting. And I was equally impressed. In advance, we were told that they would break into virtual Zoom rooms, and there were topics listed. So I had in mind what room I thought I would go join first. But I was quickly shuttled into the YL room. And I thought, that's interesting. I didn't know that was a topic in amateur radio. But I thought, hey, this is where I can do some homework, do some research, and interview these women who were there. And one woman was there because of her children, who were also licensed and also at the club meeting with her. And I interviewed other women that were there, and then other women just outside. Like I went to do a Parks on the Air vacation in Washington in August, and I spoke with a woman there who I actually chatted with on PSK over the air. So that was kind of fun, neat, having an eyeball QSO with a Parks on the Air contact. The other thing I did was I joined a couple of Facebook groups with woman or YL in the name. And there's a lot of happy women celebrating their accomplishments, but there are also very, very disappointing stories about women who are being harassed on the air or in social media. A lot of women get asked, "Are you using your husband's call?" One man was chastised for answering a female's CQ call on field day. I mean, there were these disappointing stories, but I was happy to see it's mostly about these women celebrating achievements and sharing, things that they enjoy about the hobby. So I guess the overarching theme from what I learned by doing that exploration was we might have filters on our radios, but I don't know if everyone's using them on their heart, their mind, and maybe especially their mouth in the exchanges they're having either on the air or in social media with, you know that I'm female, right? You know that Ted's black, but you may not know all the other hidden attributes, right? You might not know that I'm shy. You might not know that I'm blind. You might not know that I am a parent, right? It really doesn't matter. Can you go to the next slide, please? So there's a lot of attributes that are not visible, but with those attributes come experiences, worldview, things that we can learn from them, others, to bring into the hobby, that we can learn and share and grow in our hobby. And so I wanted to boil it down to some actions I thought I and others of us could take to grow the hobby and learn. I mean, what is our hobby if not about learning, right? Is to maybe increase our awareness of these differences or our differences in opportunity that might be presented to us but not to others. Maybe it's based on my personality that I haven't found too many differences in operating as a woman in a Parks on the Air QSO or during field day or learning digital modes. I simply haven't experienced it. But truly, other women are, and other people who identify with different characteristics and attributes that maybe aren't like ours. So, I was actually in a meeting today where this came up, but I was asked about how I build connections at work and my network at work. But one thing I'd like to suggest is that in all of our in-person meetings, or maybe even in social media, to introduce yourself to one person that you don't know, or one person that maybe doesn't look like you, or that you just would like to get to know something about a different person that you might welcome into the hobby. Perhaps a new person who's just joined us. Maybe that might be our person this evening, or maybe you've been here before, but I haven't talked to you. To start building these relationships and including others in the hobby, because we're certainly not growing. And I know that we can all benefit from their experiences, learning from these differences, and then sharing with and mentoring. Do I have another slide? Have I covered everything? So yes, basically I think it's to just build our awareness and learn and grow from experiencing difference and inclusion mainly in our hobby. I think I've got one more slide. So I did eventually think of one thing that's different about being a woman in amateur radio. And in my Parks on the Air, I used to carry my antenna in a Victoria's Secret pouch. And I bet you guys don't do that, right? You can start because it's available. It is available. Now, I carry my antenna in this because it's dual purpose. It's now my paddle holder and it holds my antenna. So, I don't know. I also wanted to share what I did with 10 watts from Iceland. That was pretty amazing and a lot of fun. So I'd encourage you all to try it. So thanks again for having me talk. If you have any questions, my call sign at Gmail is my email address. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for giving us a really good insight into women in amateur radio. And hopefully we can invite more women to be with us, invite your spouses to be here and be involved. Because I do notice that there are a few that their spouses are involved, and it seems like they enjoy being like the women that are here tonight. Okay, we now have elections. And I didn't bring any paper. Chuck, did you bring any?
I believe I have some.
First off, I have to open the floor to any nominations. Does anybody else want to be on the board here? By the way, it's a lot of fun, and there's other activities that are not available to the general club membership, being involved with the board. No nominations? And it's not torture, I'll tell you that. Okay. Did we have a way for elections online?
It's not something that the bylaws account for.
Okay, so we're not going to, if you're online, we're not going to be able to.
Unless we change the bylaws.
Yeah, we're not going to be able to take your vote. It has to be an in-person deal. Okay. Just wanted to make sure that that was the way it was. All right. I'm going to, since there's no other nominations, I'm going to up and down vote everybody but microvolt editor. All those for maintaining or voting for the list that we have up here, for everybody but microvolt editor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. All right. Now we're going to vote for Noji or Jed. Noji, I don't see him here. He's at the VHF. Yeah, they have a day in Utah County. Oh, he's already, never mind. I better not say anything. And Jed, we got back here. What? So that those, stand up so everybody knows who you are. That's Jed. Yeah. And so we need to pass out ballots, and everybody vote for either Noji or Jed. Okay? Oh, it's
On the floor?
it's on the back, in the back. Okay, they're going to count the votes, and we'll have a tally here in a minute. Yeah, something like that. I think, telling Mel about the president in Peru yesterday decided to disband the Congress and take dictatorial control of the country.
Which president was that? One was supposed to be kicked out and one is in now.
Well, he said that. They quickly convened Congress and kicked him out of office and sent the military after him. He's now in prison.
The vice president got elected as president.
Well, the vice president is now the president.
That's one of the hazards of being a
But see, yeah. So it was interesting what happened yesterday. They said it was actually the fastest coup that ever took place because it happened within minutes, and it didn't go the way he thought it was going to go. So I thought that was interesting. I know about it mainly because my wife is from Peru, and we were down there a month ago, and I'm going, for 1 month, we could have been involved in that. That would not have been, when you're down there, it's a scary situation because everything is in flux and the military comes out hard. But there was a peaceful transition of power, and it's all worked out.
So what does this have to do with our election? Are you telling us something, or?
I'm occupying a minute. We're getting rid of Morris. No, all those in no.
I've been here forever and I've never been on so long. Is that a wish? Get out and check it out.
Okay, let's see what Ricky has for us. If not, you don't take it.
Sort of family, please.
Well, after hearing that story.
Okay, do we have a drum roll? Okay.
Okay, we had a total of 28 votes, and Jed is the new microvote editor.
All right. And to introduce the speaker for tonight, we have Jed Marti, KI7 NNP, to give us a look at RF propagation models and what buildings and mountains will do to us to either enhance or defeat propagation.
Okay. My daughter-in-law is from Peru, so I've been in the airport there longer than I care to remember. And it's a very strange place. Okay, so actually, part of my reason for doing this is that I was doing this about 20 years ago for the U.S. Army in their mesh networks, attempting to do things with something called a moat, little tiny things. And they were worried that they wouldn't be able to communicate and that the network would get swamped. And we proved that their worries were well-founded, and that propagation at 2.5 gigahertz when the antenna is laying on the ground is not really too hot. So let's do the next slide. So part of this was building a computer model of all these things. And rather than trying to go out and do it in the field, because if you do a field day where you're actually paying people, it gets real expensive very quickly, particularly if you forget your tools, if you don't have a good away kit, you don't have a soldering iron, and you're out in the boonies, somebody's got to run back into town. It gets very expensive. So some of the things you might want to do with this sort of thing are coverage analysis. That's the ones that's kind of important to us. Where should we put our antennas? I mean, it's kind of obvious it should be on Ensign Peak, but there are lots of other places around that can have repeaters and good places to, say, set up if you're servicing the 100-mile run. Well, you don't sit at the bottom of Lamb's Canyon. You have to get somewhere up on top to be able to communicate with the best sites. So a computer model can tell you approximately where you should put those things. Not, I'm not going to put it behind this tree. It's not going to tell you that. Cell phone towers, where do you put them? The cell phone people have to actually pay for the ground they put them in. Maybe not the 5G ones, but if you're putting it up on somebody's farmer's land, you want to make sure you got the right position, and you want to minimize the number of those towers because they're really expensive to put up. What is the effect of a mesh network? Mesh networks are great. We were talking about it last night about how you could, if you can't talk to the main repeater, you can send a message over here, over here, and over here, and it comes back. But what happens if everybody's trying that? Usually what happens is one node gets end up being saturated, and that's the limit of your net. So it's not a complete answer, silver bullet to solve your communication problems. And that proved particularly true for these small devices that they're trying to use to protect camps or detect enemy presence, that sort of thing. So I got paid to do computer simulations of this for war games, border security. They wanted to put antenna towers and infrared cameras down on the border and have all them communicate. It's done by a company I won't name, but they make airplanes that fall out of the sky. And that was an utter disaster because they did not have a good model of communication. They couldn't communicate anywhere. Down along the border, it's mountainous, followed by flat stuff, salt flats that tend to eat up very high frequency or ultra high frequency things. Emergency operations as well. The Forest Service has a big problem. How do they communicate during a fire? Okay, next. Question? Okay. I also wanted to say, and for the younger people, none of us are too much younger, that amateur radio really is a potential career path. That it's a start of something that you can do. I mean, I got my start taking apart televisions and making 1-rod 40-meter transmitters that got me about 3 blocks. But at least I could talk to my neighbor by Morse code. But you can begin at a fairly young age. It's not as dangerous now as it was then. 300 volts DC is not fun to play with. 3000 is even worse. So what can you do with it? Well, you can be an electrical engineer. I think there's some here, at least. Mathematics and computer programming is where I ended up. And network development, there's lots of people employed by T-Mobile and that lot. They all got to know all about this stuff. And space communications, that's a big deal if you want to attract young people. Anything to do with space, rockets, and satellites going far out in the universe is a great way to attract young people. And believe it or not, DJ is another thing you can do with it. And some people like that. A lot of them were amateur radio operators at one time or another. Okay, next one. So pretty much any model of communication, can I communicate or not, is based on the link budget. And that is how much power am I putting out, how sensitive my receiver, and all of the stuff in between. So what it takes to make a contact. Now the problem is if you want to do it with voice, some of us have better hearing than others. Mine's getting bad. And some of us have experience listening and know what to listen for. And we have a fairly modest vocabulary that we use. So we kind of know what, we can kind of expect what we're going to be hearing. So we can hear through the noise much better. But that's very difficult to model. So in this case, we modeled how am I going to send digital signals, because then I can determine what the error rate is and how effective my communication is. Can I actually get a message within a certain amount of time? So things like LoRa, which are very, very slow or can be very slow, or the QRSS, the Morse code that's running at, say, 0.1 word per minute with a very narrow frequency band, very narrow frequency spread, can all be modeled. So effective radiated power, the gains from your antennas, both on the receiving side and the transmitting side, the losses in between, the losses in your transmission line, losses from not having a proper ground, all these sorts of things are included in a model. And then there's the effects of terrain. So what happens when you've got trees in the way? Trees are full of water, or they used to be full of water, maybe not so much in Utah, but if you go down into Costa Rica or Peru in the jungle, radio doesn't work very well. And for example, this is a real problem for mining companies because they want to put GPS in the jungle where there happens to be gold and copper and all those wonderful things. Well, GPS doesn't work down there. You can't see through 100 feet of multiple level tree canopies because of the amount of water in it. You can't also communicate without very, very high power. The other interesting thing, as a side point, is these guys like to use ultra low frequency, 0.001 hertz, if you can even imagine that. And mostly it's magnetic. They're detecting phase differences. That's how you find out if you've got an ore body there. But anyway, they need to be able to determine whether two sites several miles apart are receiving a signal at exactly the same time, within 1 nanosecond. And GPS gives you 100 nanoseconds on a good day. That's not nearly good enough to see anything from the kinds of stuff you would want to do. So what can a model do for that? It can tell you, yeah, you can't do this. They already know that. But it can tell you, maybe we want to go to a lower frequency. You got to put your antenna up high. It's got to be over there on top of the mountain, that sort of thing. So this particular model is based on ones that, based on vegetation and the path loss through them, buildings, the elevation, the terrain digital elevation model, And what we're going to see here is from the Utah AGRC, is the local GIS setup. Utah has a very good setup. If you want terrain down to 0.5 meters, it's available. With the houses, you can see the trees if you get that kind of stuff. But you got to have a lot of disk space. One image is 3.5 gigabytes compressed. I didn't do that. I chickened out. So what kind of things can you get? You can get the vegetation. Is it a field of wheat? Farmers love this stuff because they can see what their neighbors are planting by satellite. Is it water? Trees? They can even now tell the color of trees because they're doing LiDAR flyovers, and trees look different than buildings and stuff. They reflect differently. What other things affected brain? If you're at really high frequencies, 10 gigahertz and so on, this gets to be a problem. You can start seeing raindrops. At 10 gigahertz, you can see tree branches. If you send out a signal and watch for the reflection, you can see the tree going by. It's not much of a fun. Anyway, how is that done? There are two important parts of it. I'm not going to go too far, but remember that a radio is a wave, so it's not completely line of sight. If you dip your finger in the water, you watch the wave, and you've got a corner, you'll see that it goes around the corner somewhat and will keep on going, so it'll fill up the whole area. Well, radio waves are like that as well. As long as you have a line of sight, you're good, but you cannot have line of sight and still get a signal. And that's called the knife edge approximation. We go up to the top of a mountain, watch it as it comes down, and that's how that's computed. In order to work multiple mountains, we do something called the convex hull, which is basically, if you're going from here to Park City, you would put a rubber band over the terrain and follow the rubber band, the straight line for that. And any trees, any mountains in the way then show up on that. But if you got a big valley there, it doesn't affect the calculation. Okay, so let's see what's next. We're going to do a movie now. Model inputs. Okay, transmitter frequency. Frequency is important because low frequencies go around things much better than super high frequencies. They do bend a bit, but not as much. VHF is great, but if you're in an airplane and you're behind the mountain, they aren't going to hear you. Power, antenna, and coupling efficiency, the height and the location. Since we're working with a terrain model, we've got to know where it is. Where is the antenna? Where is the receiver? How high off the ground it is? So if you're sitting here like this or you're sitting down, that's different. If your head's in the way, UHF frequencies, life's not so good either, which is why GPS, you really want it on top of your hat because it doesn't go through your body very well. And so data rate. If you want to send video, you've got to have a high data rate, which means you've got to have a low error rate. So, for example, the satellite that went to Pluto, the data rate coming back was abysmal. That's why it took a month to get the picture. I want to say 1 baud, but it's something down in that range because it's got to go so far, and it takes, 4 or 5 hours to get here from that. Temperature. To make noise, and that's all included. So what do you have? Elevation, ground cover, if you can get it. I didn't do that. And the permeability and permittivity of the different kinds of terrain. So we need to know what effect trees have at different frequencies and so on. So let's see what we got. So what I did, the caveats. It's not a perfect model. Nothing is a perfect model other than just going out and doing it. Even that's not perfect. So there's no bouncing off the E and F and whatever layers for low frequencies. There's no multipath. Multipath, if you're in your car and you're driving, particularly downtown, and you stop and your radio goes out, that's because the radio station bounced off a nearby building and came back 90 degrees out of phase, 180 degrees out of phase, and canceled it. If you move forward 2 feet, it might work better. Of course, don't run in the car in front of you. No weather. Weather can be a big issue. We're working at 5,000 baud, no voice, low resolution data. This is 60-meter data, sort of not quite a football field is each pixel. Otherwise, I'd still be calculating. These took several hours. It's flat Earth. Sorry about that. There's no houses, no trees. For large antenna height differences, it doesn't work as well because it's not modeling ground movement. And omnidirectional antennas, and it's probably very optimistic. So now let's see what we got. There we go. So now this isn't going to work. So what I've done is I've modeled the K7XRD repeater sitting up on top of Ensign Peak, and I've got it at 70 centimeters, and I have no idea what wattage it is. It's probably 50 or something like that. And the antenna is not real high off the ground. And then I look at every place in the valley, including all the mountains, and assume that the receiver is 6 feet off the ground. You got your hand held, and you're holding it up to your ear. What does it say?
70 centimeters.
That's the one. Okay, so what I'm doing is varying the antenna height of the repeater and watching how moving it up expands the amount of coverage. And I'm moving it way up higher than any antenna up there. But what you can see is if there's no coverage, it's gray. If there's a line of sight only, it's red. So those are the kinds of things you can see from up there. And if it's radio frequency only, that is, it's bent around the terrain, then you get green. And if you have both, it's sort of yellow-brown, depending on the angle of the sun. And those are the Wasatch Mountains. And you can actually see the fault lines, which is a bit scary. And pointing the mountain down on the bottom, and repeater up on top. There's me somewhere there, and that's the junction of I-80 and R-15, which is an easily identifiable spot on the map. So what is the takeaway? Yeah, you can see lots of the valley, but you can't really get over Point of the Mountain very much. Or Lone Peak. And also it's limited by your wattage, the transmitter wattage. So that's why the circle expands, because you're falling below the noise level in the red area, even though you have line of sight. I think 2 meters is next, isn't it? So now we're going to lower the frequency. I prefer plastic slides, but kind of dates me. Okay, so now here are lots of places that aren't visible by line of sight, but you can see it by radio, at least on 2 meters. And in this case, we're bending around the mountains, and should be able to see into Park City. And it should bend around the corner, which is appears to be typical. and you can start seeing down into Utah Valley if you get far enough up. Now, like I said, there's no Earth curvature here, so it's if there's any flat earthers here, good. You'd be happy. Okay, let's move to, what do I got next? 6 meters. 6 meters should be even better. Or do I have one? What's this one? This is the 6 meters. Yeah, it'll probably play around. So in this case, you got a lot of visibility, a lot of bending around the mountains. You don't have to have line of sight. And I think there might be a 3 centimeter one.
3 centimeter?
It's probably 10 gigahertz. Okay, there you got a lot of sight, but not a whole lot of bending. So the green stuff, there's fairly limited green as it slightly will bend around the mountains. And if you see those big round things up on the top of Ensign Peak, those are our 10 gigahertz. I think they're for the fire department. And that is really horrible when it rains. Okay, that's it for the movies. Each one of these took about 4 hours of computation on a fairly reasonable machine. If you wanted to go to the 6.5 meter stuff, we'd still be at it. And then you could see around your house. So what you can't see, is it going to work by my house? Unless you're in the valley there in some of those like Tanner Park or something like that, you're going to have trouble because those are far down in the valley. Okay, so conclusions. I once taught a class with one person in it. When he fell asleep, what do you do? So again, why would you use this? Why does anybody care? Where do you put stuff? How do you respond to things? When are you going to lose contact with your ground crew? Particularly true for firefighting. If you lose track of your firefighters and they're up in the mountains and a fire is headed toward them, you got dead people, and this happens all the time. War games, big deal right now because communication in Ukraine is it's a huge thing for them. The Russians managed to shut down a satellite for about a couple hours, but they figured it out. And if you really want to know, those are the 2 books that I've used. There's lots of models, all things from very simple to very complex. If you want to do multipath fading, you got to do something akin to very fancy graphics modeling with reflections off buildings and so on. It's a nightmare. And so that's what I have. Thank you. Questions? Yeah.
So did you model from equations on these books, or was there some modeling software that was already written? Repeat the question.
The question is, did I use some modeling software? And the answer is yes, and I wrote it. Excuse me? Yes and no. At the time those books were written, computers weren't powerful enough to do this. The original computation ran on 32 small servers and still ran for like 24 hours. Just for 2.5 gigahertz modeling. The terrain was much more significant, but we actually took it out in the field and the Army verified that the model worked. which for them was huge. Wasn't good for the people they were buying stuff from, though.
Sure it'll work.
Yeah.
Did you do path profiles while you were in the Army?
Path profiles?
Microwave path profiles?
No. This was just, they were trying to do small, real low power stuff for unobtrusive sensing. So they want to detect, can you hear your footprint? Because if you can hear footprints and broadcast that fact, you know somebody's coming. But on the other hand, distinguishing between a coyote and a human is a rough deal, particularly for a dumb sensor. And at that time, sensors were pretty dumb. None of this edge computing stuff where all of the AIs moved out to the node. And they have to sit there for a month running on a 2032 battery. So how are you going to do that? You can't put much computing power in that. Yeah.
I've been playing around quite a bit the last year with radio mobile software online. Could you comment on its limitations?
Oh. I haven't tried that.
Okay. I'm assuming that anything that can complete the computation through a browser interface in 20 seconds is probably.
If you go in the book, there's like 10 or 12 models, and some of them are real primitive. Yeah, I mean, it might be line of sight, or just plain knife edge. And if you're following a path, that's not many points to compute. So, each one of those points to compute maybe took half a millisecond, but there's, 4.8 million of them. So it takes a while. And the farther you get away from the farther the distance between these two, the longer the computation takes. Because you can't just use the previous computation. You have to compute the angle and compute all the points along it. If you find a spot that stops it, then okay, you're done. But if you don't, you got to go all the way to the end, and that adds up quickly. It's a typical n squared or n cubed problem. Okay. Thank you.
All right. That was a good presentation, good idea. And with all the buildings coming up in the valley, you kind of wonder if you're going to get out going down the street. Everybody get a ticket. Anybody not get a ticket? Needs to get in the white bucket here. Put your call sign on it and bring it in the white bucket. Okay. And we've just found out tonight that we're in the same room for the next 6 months. It's every second Thursday. Well, they'll air it out every week, We're not the only ones that are going to use this place. Okay. All right, now we got 8 prizes. So Linda, can you give us 8 tickets? Our executive vice president-elect and past president, right? Yeah. Okay, thanks. One more.
Oh, one more. I miscounted. Absolutely.
Okay. Now, this is first come, first serve. I'm going to read these as they are right here. AE4KR, JA7JOH, KR7V, Laird WB7TGP, Rick KG7GOW, N7PAT, AB1IP, and KD7IZC, Arlene.